Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And today on the show we have
Karen McQuestion.
Yes, and it was a great interview. Y'all,
yes.
Karen's been around for a long time, since 2009, and she's just super wise and has some really good things to share.
Yeah, we talked to her about, longevity, publishing over, like staying with it. And and she doesn't write specifically in one genre. She kind of moves around. And so it's interesting to talk to her about that. So like if you're interested in not staying in your lane, then this would be a good podcast to listen to. Because, sometimes we get tired of our lanes.
Yeah.
But anyway, so how are you this week, Jami?
Well, speaking of being tired of being in a certain lane, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm better. In fact, I've been thinking over the last couple of days, I am better. I know it won't always be this way, but I know that I will feel like my legs have been knocked out from under me sometimes, but I've gone longer stretches without that happening.
So that's good.
Yeah, I was with my mom and my sisters and my dad last week, and my sister Joni, my sister who passed away, husband and daughter and son. And I was worried about that. I was worried that I would kind of take on their emotions, but it actually was really good. It was really good to be with them. And then I've been at my daughter's for a few days. And so I just got home today. I've still been running some ads, and they're still doing okay, which is good because I haven't really done anything. So just kind of getting back into doing ads and stuff. And Karen talked about a class, Matthew Holmes' class for Amazon ads. I'm going to check that out because she really spoke highly of it. And I don't really run Amazon ads, but I may look into that. Yeah. And I have right now a kind of a viral TikTok 20. Hang on a minute. 20. It's so stupid. You never know what's going to.
And we talk about that in the interview. That
you just don't know what's going to happen. Yeah,
you think that certain things are going to go great, and other things,
right. It's got 250, almost 260,000 views.
Wow,
yeah,
that's
it's a
awesome.
duet that I did. So of course, I don't have a book necessarily associated with it, but I did say in the thing that I'm a romance writer and reader and have my links and stuff, but. So that's kind of fun. I don't know. We'll see if that does anything. And then I am about to, after we finish this, I'm going to see Wakanda Forever. So
oh my goodness.
I crossed my arms, y'all, over my chest.
That's great.
So I'm really excited about that. But so I'm just still going slow, taking things easy, trying to give myself now one writing type assignment a week. I still haven't written a newsletter, but I have thought a lot about what Tammy said, and I may try to tackle that tomorrow. I'll let y'all know next week if I do, and just kind of put something out there because I really don't mind at all sending. I mean, I enjoy sending newsletters, and I enjoy sharing other people's books. So, so that's something I can do. To kind of get back in the community and
that's good to hear. I'm glad. Glad things are going okay.
I'm better. Yeah. So thanks to everybody for checking on me. I still have people checking on me, which is so sweet. But what about you? How are you?
Well, I've been doing some writing this week, and I also have one book that it's my planner journal thing that I have now an undated version, and I have a coil bound version that'll lay flat. Yeah. And you can't get that on KDP or Ingram. You have to go to Lulu or Book Vault. And so I was like, this is almost done real quick. I'm just going to go in there and I already had everything set up. I had it all in Lulu, and I was like, all I got to do is connect it. And then, because I have the Shopify basic plan, I think, because I'm going to do Shopify someday. So I get it all connected up. And so, that was yesterday. So I'm still working on it today, trying to figure things out, like get the best set up and get it connected to make sure it ships, because I was going to mention it to my newsletter next week, but I would just want to make sure that it's all working. So I've been working on that, and it's not that hard. It's just like, something new with all the different little, you got to make sure all the wires are connected in the back end, and so I don't mess anything up. So that's basically what I've been doing, is doing a little more extensive playing around with Shopify than I intended.
There you go. Well, it's good to know. It's good to know, because as we know, things are probably heading that direction at some point anyway. So that's good.
Yeah. And I mean, and it hasn't been that bad. It's just like, you have to find the information, and, I'm using Morgana's book to help me out. Morgana Best. She was on our podcast a while back. So yeah. So that's about all I've got. So should we get on with the interview?
Yes, we should. Because it's great.
Here's Karen. Well, today we are really excited to talk with Karen McQuestion. Hi, Karen. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Oh, we're so glad you're here.
Thank you.
So let me read your bio and we'll get started. Karen McQuestion first self-published in Kindle in 2009. Since then, she has become a hybrid author who published more than 20 novels and sold 3 million books.
Wow. That is crazy. And 2009 too. Wow.
It's a lot of years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell us how you got into writing.
My story is really similar to a lot of authors that I've talked to. It's that I always loved to read. And as a student, I was a pretty good student writer. Teachers noted it. I wasn't particularly good at other things. I wasn't athletic, or I was a good student, but that was really the one area that I loved and excelled at. And then my whole life, I wanted to write fiction. I wanted to write novels. But back then they always said, like, no one can make a living except for, a few chosen few. But it was always on my mind. And then when life went on, I got married. I had 3 kids. When the youngest was in preschool, I thought, I've got a little bit of time now. Instead of just being someone who thinks about writing, maybe I should actually try writing. And from there, joined a local writers group, took workshops, read books. I wrote articles for the local paper for a while. I wrote novels that I submitted. I was actually agented twice for 2 different books, and neither one worked out, and just didn't think it was going to come to be. And then I heard that you could self-publish on Kindle. That was 2009. I read an article about a guy named Boyd Morrison, and the article was like all 3 paragraphs long. And he had a similar story to mine. He had been agented and didn't get any takers for his book, self-published it on Kindle, and in a short period of time sold, I think it's like 7,000. And because of the response, an editor or a publisher who had previously turned him down was now interested, and they acquired his book. And he became traditionally published. Well, I read that article, and I wasn't thinking Simon & Schuster would pick me up. I was just like, you can do that? You can put a non-traditionally published book up on a self-published book on Kindle? And I just didn't even know that was like allowed.
Wow.
So I thought, I'm going to do that. So at that point, I had quite a number of manuscripts that had never been published and had been rejected multiple times. And over the course of a couple different weekends, my husband and I uploaded them. And I was so delighted. The first month I made $30. And up till this point, I'd only spent money on publishing. Writing. Exactly. It was like, wow, and the next month I made $300.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, this is going in the right direction. I just couldn't believe it. It just really took off from there. My timing was really, really good. And the funny thing is, people had been with me in writers groups. I would contact them and say, you should do this, knowing that they were terrific storytellers and writers, and no one was interested. They were all like, no, they wanted to go for the traditional route. They wanted the dream. And I respected that, but I was like, but I have readers and I'm making money. I mean, so anyway, that was how I got my start, and it's just gone from there.
That is so funny that you said that about the writers group, because I had written, when you said that about self-publishing in 2009, I wrote down writing group because I went to a writing group before I just started that first book, kind of thing, and was testing the waters. I went to RWA, and you could go twice without paying. And so I went to both meetings, the 2 meetings, and then decided, I'm not a writer. I'm not going to do this. But both of those meetings, someone got up both times and vilified Kindle, indie publishing. They were going to take your rights. They were going to exploit you. They were going to do all of these things. And there was a woman behind me who became my friend when I went back a couple of years later. She had self-published, and she was back there the whole time. They were talking kind of in my ear going, that's not true. Honey, you can do this. And I was like, oh, wow, we've got a little controversy going on here. I didn't know anything about anything at that time, but it's good for you. I think that's just brave and really innovative and future thinking to really do that. Because not only was it probably just logistically hard because you had to format your books and all of that without tools, you had probably some aversion to that in your circles, the circle of writer friends.
My thought was, if the books get bad reviews, or I can just pull them down. I mean, I almost felt like I'm flying under the radar and testing them out.
Right.
And so I just couldn't believe, and like you said about the formatting, there were no directions. There was no software. There was just me and my husband. And I remember it was so tense between us because it was just not going well. And he said to me, I hope this, is worth doing. We've blown like 3 weekends of our lives doing it. So luckily I was like, I hope so too. Please God, please let a few people buy those books,
Yeah. That's so funny.
Fantastic.
I came along a little bit after you, and I found a blog post from another author on how to format your book in Word to make it acceptable to the meat grinder. And at Smashwords.
Smashwords, sure.
Yeah. And so I followed that. I printed that out. I kept it in a notebook. I highlighted it. And there were still tears when I did anything like that. And I'm just so thankful that I remember when Drafted Digital came along, and you could use their service to produce an uploadable EPUB. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is the best thing ever, So things have certainly changed. Yeah. Right. So I think one thing we want to talk to you today about is just like longevity and like staying the course and how you've done that. So I think that'll come out like in the questions and stuff as we go through. But what would be your definition of success?
I've thought about this because I know this is a question that comes up on your podcast. And I originally, all I wanted, I guess I have to say my definition of success has changed over the years, and I would say, well, first, if I could get a book into the hands of readers, and if they liked it, and if I sold a certain number of copies, if I could do this for a living, if they got translated into different languages. But now at this point, I feel like if I mention I'm working on a book, or I put a book up for pre-order and people buy it or say on Facebook, oh, that sounds wonderful, I cannot wait, I'm going to put that date on my calendar, or I'm going to pre-order it. And I think, but sometimes I haven't even finished the book. And I feel like, oh, that's an incredible leap of faith. It almost makes me kind of nervous. Like people are waiting and they're expecting it to be a certain way. And I don't want to let them down. And yet, how great is that people are actually waiting for your books? And that's something that I knew happened to authors like Stephen King or Nora Roberts, or, whoever you feel was the ultimate author. But the fact that it happens to me, I feel like that's my definition of success.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So do you use your pre-orders sort of as motivation or?
No, I'm very anxiety ridden. And so I will not put anything up until I mean, it might be with the editor or with my beta readers, but until I have a beginning, middle, and end. And because I know some authors will schedule out even a couple books in a series. And there's some part of me that thinks, what if someone in my family got sick, or what if, and I know you can change dates and things get delayed, and it's not as big of a deal, but I just feel better having something completed. So
right.
Sometimes my pre-order terms are like all of a week and a half. Like, hey, guess what, guys? I've got a book coming out, and so that's how I operate, and it's worked out well for me.
Yeah, I think that's great, though. Yeah. I agree, especially having been having just come through that. I can't imagine putting up a pre-order until I knew that book was ready, or at least very close to ready.
Yeah, I never wanted to do it, but after 2020, I'm like, no, I think I'll just hang out until I have something ready to go. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say I don't work well under pressure, but I know some people who do.
Yeah.
They're like, knowing I have that deadline, knowing this is going to keep me on task, and I think it's more likely to make me curl up in a ball and go, why did I do this?
Yep. Well, what do you wish you'd known about writing and craft when you started?
When I started out, it was the idea of self-publishing wasn't even on my radar. I mean, there wasn't self-publishing on Kindle. So I was trying to soak up all the wisdom of the experts. They can't, your listeners can't see that I used finger quotes, but I did. And so I was trying to do everything that I thought would get me in the door with an agent or an editor. And so, things about craft, they would say things like, if you want to, good writing uses metaphors, similes, never use the passive voice. And so I remember reading once, this is the most ridiculous thing, that every great novel had sex and a death. So the sex could be alluded to. It could have happened in the past. And so I was thinking, well, how can I incorporate that into my story? I was thinking too hard. And so what I've learned is just tell the story, trust your instincts. We all know how to tell a story, whether you sit down with friends and you relate something that happened in your own life, or you're telling a joke or whatever. Just get all that clutter out of your head. And that's what I had to sort of work towards that, because I had just spent years filling my head with all the things I should be doing.
Right. Right. Yeah. I really identify with that because, I did learn to write in a critique group with Romance Writers of America. And they were great writers. I mean, some of them are just amazing storytellers and know the craft really, really well. I did not. And so I battle that sometimes too, the kind of do's and don'ts, shoulds and shouldn'ts. And what I have realized is, it's that whole, you can't break a rule until you know the rule kind of thing. And so you can break the rules. Clearly, we've seen that over and over and over again in our industry. Very successful books that broke the rules. They just told a really intriguing story. Sorry. But it's hard, though. It's hard when you have that kind of drilled into your head to step out of that and write authentically, maybe is the word I'm looking for. That's not so bound up in the do's and don'ts of writing. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Oh, no, absolutely.
I'm not drinking, I swear. I'm just water.
Yeah.
Even for me, it's a little early in the day, but yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's important that we all kind of think about when we're telling our stories.
Yeah. Well, what about marketing? What do you wish you'd known about marketing?
I think that when I started out, I felt like marketing was this kind of elusive, difficult thing that only experts knew how to do. And that, other people would be the key to getting the word out. You'd get a better known author to give you a shout out on social media, or get somebody to give you blurbs, and I've come to find out that it's all on you. It's all on me as an author. Like, nobody cares if my book does well, and they shouldn't, because if they're readers, they're looking for a great story, and if they're other writers, they're worried about their books. I mean, I certainly had my share of friends help me out and spread the word, but that's not something that I count on or rely on. So marketing is ever changing. I mean, what worked in 2010 is completely different than what's happening now. And there are Facebook pages where people share information. I've got author friends that talk about what's working for them. And so I feel like I'm always learning. And sometimes I feel like I'm just behind the curve a little bit, like I'm scrambling to get caught up. But it's also really empowering. It's not like you just keep refreshing your Amazon page or look at your dashboard and you're like, why isn't this book selling? Why isn't this book selling? Which I've done my share of that too. But but more often you can think, okay, what can I do? What can I do to spread the word and find the right readers for this book? And it's all about visibility. I mean, that's, people can't read a book they don't know about.
Correct.
So how do I reach them? And without being obnoxious and saying, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. So it's just a matter of sort of checking out which options work for your book and your genre and you as an author within your comfort zone. I don't like real life events. A lot of authors love that. I just don't do well. I'm not comfortable. So I love doing everything online. And so that's what
So what are some of your favorite online marketing things that you do? What do you enjoy the most?
I love futzing around with, and I did say futzing, with Amazon and Facebook ads.
Just to make that clear, huh?
Just making sure. I don't know. It came out of my mouth and I was like, I never even used that word. I don't know why I don't know where that came from. Anyway, I do love Facebook and Amazon ads. I find that Facebook ads work best for books that are free or very inexpensive, 99 cents. Whereas Amazon ads, people are actively looking for books in your genre. I've gone through ups and downs with that, where sometimes I'll get an ad that works really well for a long time and then suddenly it doesn't. And so I've taken different courses. Right now I'm taking Matthew Holmes's course. Are you familiar with him?
No.
Well, I really, I've just started it and I'm really impressed. He has a very matter of fact, nuts and bolts, data-driven way of approaching it. He's an excellent teacher. And I've heard from other people who are further into the course that it just gets better. So I'm kind of excited about doing it again.
Yo, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Not a problem. I understand there's an editor on the back end of this thing. So
yes, there is, but we probably won't take it out. Oh my gosh. We're so professional.
So you enjoy the ads, the working with the ads and tweaking the ads. Do you have any other things you do online that you really enjoy?
If I keep an eye out for if people mention me or my books, and I make a point to on Instagram and Facebook, always responding, thanking them for spreading the word or giving the book a shout out, or because people don't have to do that. They don't have to say, oh, I just read a book I really enjoyed. And then they hashtag it and they, so I know a lot of people, other authors don't have time for that, or maybe they delegate to assistants or whatever. That's something I do. Because I personally enjoy seeing what people are saying. And I'm also very appreciative. So that's another thing that I do a lot of, Facebook and Instagram. And I'm sure I do miss some on occasion, but I try not to.
Yeah. That's really great.
Yeah. And it's a very simple thing. It's not like, here's a new strategy, you can try. So, but it's something that it can be very effective, I think, to let people know that you are appreciative.
Well, and that the fact that they did it made a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really underrated too.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I am on, belong to a reader group, and I do post when my books are on sale or if I have a new book coming out. I've got a newsletter that is just not very, I have less than 2,000. I hear friends who say I've got 15,000 subscribers. And so mine is just a little, if anyone wants to sign up for my newsletter, you could join the club, but that's not something I rely on a lot. I also do Goodreads giveaways on a regular basis.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I don't know that it necessarily leads to reviews, but what I like about it is that the people that enter add the book to their
like their list or
to be
their
read
list
shelf.
Or,
they shelve it.
Yeah.
To be read.
Yes. Thank you for jumping in there because I blanked out for a second. But so that sort of increases your visibility because then their friends will notice that they added this book anywhere where you can get the cover or the book in front of other people.
Yeah.
And then I have a theory, which no one has ever said this is true. And maybe I just made this up in my head, but because Amazon also owns Goodreads, it seems to me like when a lot of people are adding your book to their to be read pile or whatever, that it does something to the algorithms on Amazon. I say this because you know how when you're on KDP, periodically Amazon will send you something saying, we'd like to put this book into Prime, or we'd like to feature it on a Kindle deal or whatever. And I had randomly done a Goodreads giveaway for a much older title, one that hadn't done much. And about, 6 weeks later, I got an email from Amazon saying they were going to put it in Prime with my permission. And, I was invited to do it. And I thought, well, that's weird that they picked that book. And then I was like, oh, I just did the Goodreads giveaway and like 7,000 people added it. I wonder if the algorithms were like, oh, suddenly this book is doing well. I don't know.
Right.
So take that for what it's worth.
Oh, that's super interesting, though.
It is.
It's just a theory.
Well, and it's do you do the 119?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I have not noticed any difference between paying. So that's what I do.
Yeah. I've heard that from other authors. And I think that's, if it's a new release, maybe because they do send out the link or whatever, but I feel like for an older book, that's a good idea. Well, what assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career, and looking back, did they turn out to be right or wrong?
Actually, I assumed, and this was before I jumped into KDP, which used to be called DTP. Digital text platform is what I believed it was called. But anyway, when I was still trying to become traditionally published, I tried different, chick lit was hot at one point. So I wrote a book that was chick lit, and then that didn't go anywhere. And then I thought, well, now young adult contemporary realism is doing well. So I'm going to try one of those. But I assumed, and this was true, that you couldn't write in all different genres. That if you picked something, that's who you were. If you were a cozy mystery writer, that's what you did. If you were a young adult novelist, it'd be very hard to break out of that. So, and every time, twice I had agents, I thought, okay, well, if this sells, that's what I am. Then I'm for someone who writes chick lit, or I'm someone who writes whatever. And, because I was doing it on my own, I just started writing whatever interested me. So I remember for a while I was with, for quite a long while, I was with Amazon Publishing. And I remember someone at Lake Union telling me, it'd be easier to market you if you stayed in the lane, which they weren't wrong. It would have been. And I was like, I want to stay in a lane, but it just doesn't interest me. I get an idea for something different, and it just happens to be in a different genre. So I follow the idea. And for a long while, I felt like I wasn't I failed somehow. Like, how is it that other authors can successfully write in the same genre and come up with something fresh and interesting and new and keep readers engaged, but I just don't feel like I have that ability. I want to deviate. So if I wrote a family drama, now I'm like, okay, I'm all family dramaed out. Now I want to do something more humorous, or now I want something with a little more mystery. So it was interesting because they interviewed Colleen Hoover just recently in the New York Times, and she said she struggled with that she thought, why can't Colleen Hoover be the brand?
Right.
Why does it have to be the genre that's the brand? You like my voice and my style. Not that every book is going to be for every reader, but that's even the case sometimes with people who stay in their lane. So I felt a little validated when I heard her say that, because I thought, okay, that's true.
And so now, do your readers follow you kind of wherever you go? Do you have some that don't cross over from one type of book to another?
I do think that not every reader will cross over, but enough do that I have a career. Yeah. And I get a fair number of reviews that say the reason I like it is that her books aren't all the same. I know I'll like the story, but I don't necessarily, it's not going to be a carbon copy of what she's done before. So, I love reading that, because that, again, is just the validation that you hope for. I do think some of the things that I've done in the past, I feel sort of played out. I would find it hard to believe that I'd write another young adult novel. I did a bunch of them and I enjoyed doing it, but I kind of feel like I'm veering in a different direction.
Yeah, I think a lot of authors are at that point where they're like, I have written, 47 cozy mysteries set in a small town, and I'm kind of done with this small town. So it's good to hear from somebody who's been able to kind of vary things up and have a very successful career. So that's really good.
And most recently, you're writing psychological thrillers, though, right?
Well, see that's been a problem too, because the last three, they are categorized psychological thrillers, and they have a lot of elements, but I guess I just have a difficulty with horrible things happening and gore, and they're like cozy thrillers. You know what I mean? It's there's some mystery and intrigue, and bad things happen, but they're not so horrible that you're on the edge of your seat going, okay, I'm feeling a little sick. This is not going in a good direction. So I guess I write the books I'd want to read. And I'm the kind of person that, like, when my husband Greg and I are watching something and I know there's the serial killer's coming, I'll be like, I'm going in the next room. Call me when it's safe to come back. Yeah. So I'm having trouble categorizing my books. I think Elena Johnson had a really great expression. She said, genre adjacent. Yeah. I think they're just genre adjacent. So
there you go.
That's great.
It works.
Yeah. Yep.
I like that.
Yeah. I love that. Well, have you, we like to talk about mistakes and lessons learned. So have you ever had a mistake that turned out to be a good thing?
That's such a great question. I have made so many mistakes that we don't have time to cover them all. I don't know that anything flipped and became like, oh, I'm so, I thought that was a mistake, but it turned out well. I just feel like every time I made a mistake, I learned from it. And it also made me less afraid to make mistakes. I feel like there's nothing I can do, and to quote Elena Johnson again, there's nothing that's a career killer. You can write a book that you thought would do really well, and it doesn't do as well as you thought. And yes, it's disappointing, but it's not the end of the world. You can write another book. Hopefully that one will land better. So I feel like I've done things like I've been Kindle Unlimited nearly exclusively forever. And at one point I went to a writer's conference where one of the speakers was emphatic that you should be wide. I mean, she had her reasons and they were great reasons. And I thought, she kept saying, you are going to leave money on the table. You're leaving money on the table. You're cutting off your readership. She had valid points. So I took 4 of my books and I put them into wide. And I don't know if it was because I didn't know how to market books outside of, my little comfort zone or what, but they just sank like a stone. And then I thought, well, I'm not giving them enough time. So I'll waited out. It never got better.
Ugh.
So
Yeah.
it did make me a little wary of doing that again. But then again, I never say never, because things in this business change so much all the time.
Yeah. But you experimented with it. You tested it to see. I think that's really smart. And, I think that's a great way to approach it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Well, what about the opposite? Have you ever had something you thought this is a home run and then it turned out to flop?
Oh my
all
gosh.
the time? Yeah, me too.
Well, or even it might not be a flop by, all standards, but
yes.
I'll think, well, this one, I have an interesting story, and it's not about me. It's about Charles Dickens. And because I wrote a Christmas novella recently, so I was looking to see, like, Christmas novellas, how long are they? What elements do they have? And of course, the king of all is Charles Dickens. And I did not know that he had actually written 5 Christmas novellas. A Christmas Carol was the first one. And then subsequently, he wrote 4 others. And he said to a friend that one of them was going to be even bigger than A Christmas Carol. That he just felt it was going to be it was going to outdo it. And of course, that wasn't the case.
No.
And I thought, isn't that interesting that we aren't good judges? Even Charles Dickens wasn't a good judge of who his readership, which stories they'd take to. And I mean, this was a man who went around the country reading aloud. And so for his time, he probably really had his finger on the pulse. And so I've had kind of a similar situation where I thought books would do great, and then they didn't. One in particular I'm thinking of, it was a young adult paranormal, and it subsequently has been getting better reviews in the last couple of years than it did when it was first released. And all I can think of is maybe it's finding its readers, or maybe I don't know, or maybe people have changed. I don't know. It's so I always feel like it's not over till it's over or ever.
Yeah.
It's books are out there. The words don't expire. There's no expiration date. It's like readers might find it 5 years from now. So
that's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. And what is popular right now may not, or what we write right now might not actually come into its own until, 5-10 years down the road. This hardly ever happens to me because I'm not very futuristic, but sometimes people, trend, like they're like, they see a trend coming and they write a book, but it takes a while for the trend to match up with what they wrote, So.
Well, I know one of my earlier books, the failed chick lit, the character was somewhat like me. I believe I'm on the spectrum. Based on self-diagnosed. I have one of my children is very much that way. And so that character was very much like that kind of personality. And I remember my agent sent it around, and one of the editors said, there was a story element where this woman owns a house and a friend comes to her door and he says, I'm locked out of my house and my girlfriend kicked me out or whatever. Can I stay the night here? And she goes, oh. And she has to think about it because the guest bedroom she hasn't done anything with, and the sheets are, and she's like, well, I finally she says, I guess you can, but I'm not really set up for guests. And I remember one of the editors that my agent submitted to said, what kind of friend hesitates? Why wouldn't she say, of course, come on in? And when I read those notes, I was like, oh, is that what people do? Yeah. I just was like, because that would have been me like, well, we got the couch. You have to work it out in your head. Yes, exactly. So it's funny because that book initially, when it came out, Amazon Publishing picked it up. It was self-published first. And there were some reviews that were like, yeah, I don't like that main character. She's not very giving, or she's, and more recently, I think with Sheldon Cooper and The Big Bang Theory and Eleanor Oliphant, that book, people are like, oh, okay, I get who this person is.
Right.
She's not this cold-hearted person who's not a good friend. She just has her issues. So I think that's what you were talking about, Sarah, how 5 or 10 years down the road, things change and you never know what's going to connect with people and why.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, since you've been doing this for a while, what do you think is the biggest mindset change that you've had to make during your writing career?
I would say I've had this tendency in years past to compare myself to my books to other books and myself as an author. And I would read books and think, okay, well, my book's at least as good as this book. Why are they why is it doing better? Or this person, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I should have a cover more like theirs, or maybe, and it is a good idea to keep keep up with what's doing well and why, because nobody's an island unto themselves. We all know the kind of covers that appeal to the readers of our genre or whatever. And that's a good thing to know. But sometimes other people's books just do better than mine. And that doesn't mean I don't have my fair share of readers or my fair share of sales, or, I mean, I get to write stories for a living. I'm way ahead of where I ever thought I would be. So that comparing was not doing me any favors at all. It was detrimental. It robbed me of time and energy, and I needed to get away from that. It was a process, because I think that's human nature. To think, well, this person won an award, and that person, has a movie deal, and that person, and it's just, and I have stuff they don't have,
Yeah. It's hard though.
It is hard.
I've talked about that on this podcast a lot. In fact, that could be the name of it. Don't do what Jami does, comparing yourself to other people. It's just a little long. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, how did you kind of break that habit?
I think it was a process. I don't think it wasn't like quitting smoking or anything.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I went cold turkey. It was bit by bit. I mean, it's true. There are always going to be people that have more than what you have and less than what you have. And contentment can go a long way. So I think what really, since you asked, Sara, I think what really helped was being genuinely happy for other authors, and specifically friends, where I'm like, okay, so they went to #1 in their category or in Kindle. To me, that doesn't mean like, well, why them and not me? That just means it can be done. And I've also met a lot of really very generous authors who have shared information with me, who've shared when I have a new book out, who've offered to help me in different ways. And so that's been really helpful too. When someone says, when you approach them and say, I noticed that you did such and such, do you mind telling me how you did that? And they're like, no, I'd love to tell you. And that's what I love about the whole indie community is there's an abundance of readers out there, and they can read a book in 2 days. Right. So if you can only write a book so many per year, there's plenty for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
So sort of an abundance mindset. That's great.
Yeah. Speaking of that, and Karen was talking about her genre adjacent books, like maybe they didn't have a home or whatever. That is not true, because the Moonlight Child.
Yes, that's right.
Was at #3 in the Kindle Store for all of 2021. Please tell us how you did that.
Yes,
I'm taking notes.
That was so exciting. And Kristen Hanna, who is, I think the world of her, she was #1. So I was like, oh, I'm right behind her. I actually didn't know that was the case, except that my friend Tess Thompson sent me a screenshot. And I said, I thought she photoshopped something. I'm like, how did you do this? And she's like, no, here's a link. And I didn't realize Amazon did a page that was for the entire year. So it was cumulative. Well, just to tighten up the story a little bit, I had been with Lake Union Publishing, which is a division of Amazon Publishing, for quite a while. Was really happy with them. And then switched editors and still was happy. But that editor had a different take on what she wanted. But she did publish 3 of my books very successfully. And then I submitted The Moonlight Child, because as I said before, I like to have the complete manuscript done before I send it in. And she took a pass. So, and at that point, my books were doing really well with them. So that was it wasn't a complete shock because I sensed the enthusiasm was waning. It was nothing I could put my finger on, but I just had that feeling. And they were kind of veering in a different direction. So from that point, I just thought, I want this book to do really well. I had to prove to myself that it wasn't turned down because it was a bad book.
Right.
That's
hard.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just thought, I'm going to try to do everything I can. I would say, more driven with this book than I was with previous books, probably because I had Amazon Publishing behind me. But I had also done some indie publishing along the way too. But those just felt like little extra books to me, and so I just was like, you know what, I was in overdrive. I poured on the ad spend for Amazon ads. In fact, the first month or two, I think I only broke even. I was like, everyone's like, oh, your book's doing really well. And I'm like, I am making zero money on this book, but I am driven. I am, I am going to prove that it's not a bad book. And I have a review team that was really wonderful that read it ahead of time and posted reviews. I did Goodreads giveaways. I did Facebook ads. And I sort of lucked out with the cover. A lot of people said they found the cover intriguing. So that was really helpful. And again, people either thought it was more of a thriller or a ghost story for some reason, which it is not. But it was intriguing enough that at least they stopped and looked. So it started climbing the charts, and it started actually making money beyond the ad spend. So I was able to sort of scale up. So the ads that had that good ROI, I was able to scale up, and the ads that weren't doing as well, I killed them or tweaked them, and I just played with it. I made this my full-time job for like 2 or 3 months. I got a really terrific narrator for the audiobook. I released it in large print, which is something I hadn't done before. Trying to think what else I did. I did tons of giveaways, and like every time I felt like everyone in the world that could have won this book won it, because every time I'd say to someone, hey, do you want me to do a giveaway on your Facebook page? They'd be like, okay. And so, and then what happened was, it was just really one of those right time, right place luck, is that readers started suggesting it.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of thing that you can't make happen. When it does happen, it's the best thing ever.
Yep.
And again, I tried to jump in and say, I really appreciate that you can recommend the book. So I was sending out good vibes to the universe, hoping that counted for something. Like, oh, thank you. So, and it just did consistently well. And
That's
then,
great.
Success tends to breed success, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of great books out there that don't get their due. But once you're acknowledged as ranking well, and also getting good ratings, KDP would occasionally put it into a promotion, which boosted it too. So it was a whole combination of things. And at the end of the year, it was number 3 for the entire store.
That's amazing. And it has 27,000 reviews, 4.5 stars, looks like, reviews. So yeah, it was a good book.
I had an author friend who had a theory. She said, do you have a theory why this book did particularly well? And I was like, I don't know. I guess people liked it, And she said, because I have a theory. She said, you released it during the pandemic, and it's the story of I'm not giving anything away to say, a little girl who's being captive in a house and being held captive. And she said, and during the pandemic, we were all held captive in our houses.
Yeah.
And so maybe on some level, people connected with that.
Right.
And I said, maybe.
Yeah.
As good a theory as any.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah,
well,
that's great. Yeah. Well, it seems like there's, like, you did some very specific things, but then there's always that kind of mysterious, like maybe that it released during the pandemic and the themes of it appealed, so things you can't account for as well as things that you can. So I think that was great that you brought both of those out. So
yeah.
So, go ahead.
Oh, because you can't make that happen. I've had 2 other books come out since then, and they've done, I'm not complaining, they've done well, but they weren't the Moonlight Child. So, it's, you can't say, could 1,000 people please go on social media and recommend this? That's all I ask. I really don't want much more than that.
That's a good marketing plan right there. Yeah.
Right there. That's a strategy.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, talk to us about your translations, because you have books in such varied languages. So how did that come to be?
Well, I have several that I connected it very early on with a woman in Germany who was translating for the big publishers. And I had emailed her and asked if she would be interested in working for me doing, I had a series, a young adult series at that point. There are 4 books. And she was like, well, I've never worked with an author before. In fact, I had emailed several translators and all of them were like, no. But she was like, okay. So we worked out a payment schedule and she did all 4 and I paid her. And usually within a year, I recouped the money. This was pretty early on. And so I took German in high school. So I knew a little teeny bit, but not enough to know if she did a great job. Right. But I knew her other books had gotten great reviews. So that was early on. I had books in German. And then Amazon Publishing also sold some of the foreign rights for me in other languages. But the Moonlight Child has sold in 9 different languages.
Wow. And have you handled that yourself?
Well, what happened was, like I said, when things go well, they seem to lead to other things. And so the book was selling really well. And I got 2 different emails from publishers in other countries, like, have you sold the Vietnamese rights for the Moonlight Child? And I was like, are you kidding me? No. Funny you should ask.
Hold on, let me check.
And then there was another one too. I can't remember. And so I thought they offered to buy them from me. And I really immediately thought, I am in over my head here. Even if the contract's in English, So I contacted a foreign rights agent, and she said, I normally just work with publishers. I do have a couple authors that I'm working with. And so she agreed to broker those 2 that had contacted me. So I had offers in hand. And then and I thought, well, if I get any more emails, I'll just forward them to Taryn. But as it turns out, she actively tried to sell them. And she did. Great. So far she's sold to 9 different languages / territories. And in a couple of countries, this Moonlight Child's doing really well. And I'm getting messages from people in like the Czech Republic. For some reason, they must have a really terrific translator. I swear she made the book better, because I've gotten so many messages from people in maybe a dozen, maybe 15. And it just came out like 2 months ago. Oh, wow. And so they've asked, like, can you send me a card with your signature? And I was like, well, I could, but like, why? I mean, so it's really opened things up in that way. And so I just recently told the foreign rights agent, I'm like, I have another book that has a child in peril. It's obviously not the exact same kind of book, but maybe you might want to go back to these publishers and say, if the Moonlight Child's doing well, that might be something they'd want to pick up. And she thought that was a great idea. So it's kind of spread from there.
That's awesome.
Wow. That's terrific.
I love that. And so do you still have your agent?
Well, I do not have a regular agent or a literary agent. I have a foreign rights agent. And so, and it's funny because she sent me a box of books in Slovak and Czech. And so I want to keep a copy of each, but I obviously don't need more. So now I'm online emailing, like, there's a group of expats. Like, does anyone want some free books? So I am getting takers, but I was like, oh, that was so nice of her, but now what do I do?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I forgot what the question was, Jami.
Do you still have a traditional agent?
No, I don't have a traditional agent. It's funny because I did have in the past for things that didn't work out, but and I did over the years talk to agents occasionally who would contact me and say, can we just talk? I think I might want to represent you. And for whatever reason, whenever they said they wanted to manage my career, I would have a clutch of anxiety over
Did you
that.
break out in hives?
Yes, I was like, well, I'm managing my own career and I'm doing just fine. Well, it kind of feels to me like the difference between running your own business and being an employee. It's like, I don't want someone else telling me what to do or what's what. So I would be a very poor client. I do have an entertainment attorney. I've got a movie deal that is pending. And so she's handling that because, again, I would just probably, be very poor at negotiating, and she knows what's what. So I'll let her handle
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So one quick question before we wrap up. I did want to circle back to your longevity. What do you think is the biggest thing that, and this may go into our last question, but I mean, how have you been able to stay in this business? It's hard. It's a hard business.
Well, I think that I keep having ideas.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And this is going to make me sound a little flaky, but when I'm not writing, I get really bad nightmares. I've noticed a correlation, and not so much when I'm in between books and working on some marketing or tying up admin kind of things, but long periods. For instance, my mom at the end of her life needed more of my time, so I really wasn't writing, and I would have strange dreams, and I realized later there's a correlation somehow. There's somehow ideas in my head that need to get down, and so I feel like I would keep writing books even if it wasn't all that profitable. Maybe I'm wrong. I just feel like I keep having ideas, and I keep wanting to follow the idea to see where it's going, and then I want to see what other people think of the story when I'm done.
Right. Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And I noticed a lot of people when I first started out in Kindle, there was a core group of 10 or 15 people that were doing really well. And I mean, if you were paying attention, you would see these same names coming up because there weren't as many books out there or as many authors. And every now and then I'll think, I wonder what happened to so-and-so. I haven't seen their name in a while. And I'll be like, oh, they just stopped writing. They're just in 2014 or 2016. And I think, I wonder why they stopped writing. It just seemed kind of sad to me. Maybe they won the lottery, or maybe they just told all the stories they wanted to tell, or maybe they're happy as can be. Right. But it just seems like this is such a privilege to be able to do this, and it's so much fun. I don't know why anyone wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Love it.
That is great.
Yeah.
Well, so this may be a little bit repetitive, but what do you think the best thing is that you've done to set yourself up for success?
Well, not giving up, which is
I was going to say,
people always say, don't give up. And I think with every book, do everything you can to give it the visibility, but don't beat yourself up if it doesn't do as well as you had hoped.
Right.
Because you can, I've been there, we've all been there, where you're like, I don't understand. I thought for sure this would appeal to blah, blah, blah. Or you're be like Charles Dickens, who I wrote one that's going to even surpass A Christmas Carol. It's out of your hands. If you wrote the best book you could, and you put it out there, and you're doing what you can to give it visibility, you had the fun of writing it. That's how I feel. I had the joy of writing it, and move on. Maybe it'll pick up later. Maybe it won't. Maybe the next one will do really well. So that's what I think is really been helpful to me.
Oh, I love that. And also I would say you're fearless in a lot of ways. I mean, as an observation, I mean, 2009, you're putting up books and nobody else is. You're going, I just feel like and the thing with Moonlight Child, where you were just making decisions that were really focused and, purposeful. And I love that. I feel like that you really are an example of that. We should all look
so
to.
Nice.
Yeah.
Jami, you said brave, but I feel like I was desperate when I put it up in 2009. I was like,
Online.
They are not going to let me in the front door, so I'm going to come in around the side. That is a mistake, waiting for other people to acknowledge you, or maybe
give you permission.
Thank you. That's exactly right. Give you permission. Give yourself permission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I had waited for somebody to give me permission, that would have never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Not with my grammar and issues that I had. So, you have to do it yourself if you're, or you don't have to, but
but you can.
No reason not to.
You can.
Yeah.
Especially now, it's so accessible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it's been great having you here. Thank you so
great
much.
Being here. I love your podcast. I was really excited when I got your invitation. So thank you.
Thank you. We love doing it. So,
and we've loved talking to you. This has been really, really, really good.
Yeah.
Oh, great. I'm so glad. Thank you.
Well, tell everybody where they can find you.
They can find me at KarenMcQuestion.com. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. And that's all I've done so far. I have not tackled TikTok, although everyone says I should. So I'm not ruling it out, but at this point in time, I'm not there. So I'm around. You can find me. You can people.
Very good.
Okay.
Very good.
That's great. All right. Well, thanks for listening today. And you can find all those links at thewishidknownthenpodcast.com. And thanks to Alexa Larberg for editing and producing the podcast, and to Adriel Wiggins for doing all the admin. We'll see everybody next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.